Sandra Day O'Connor is a modern-day Renaissance woman.
Growing up on the Lazy Bee Ranch in Arizona, she could brand cattle, drive a tractor, fire a rifle with accuracy well before she reached her teens.
Not many people are privileged to grow up on a ranch as I did. It was just a wonderful life.
When Justice O'Connor graduated law school, opportunities for women in the law were few and far between.
Oh, I couldn't get a job offer. I really couldn't. The law firms had never hired a woman, and they weren't about to, and they didn't care that I had a good record at Stanford. That was immaterial. They just didn't hire women. The only offer I really got was in the county attorney's office in San Mateo County, California. And I ended up running for the legislature in Arizona and having a position in the legislature.
Sandra O'Connor has been a daughter, wife, and mother, and she brought those identities to the bar, the State House, and ultimately the bench.
I was the first woman chosen to be a justice on the United States Supreme Court. It took 191 years for that to happen, from the start of our effective Constitution. That's a long time to wait. But thank goodness the barrier was broken. It was a very great honor, but it was quite a responsibility, because if I didn't do the job well enough, it might take more than 191 years to get the next woman on the court. I started this iCivics program to teach young people the concept of being involved in helping government reach decisions. We teach primarily by having games on there that young people play, and in the process they learn.
My favorite game is Win the White House. I like Branches of Power. Immigration Nation. Do I have a right? Supreme Decision.
I'm very proud of the fact that it has spread so widely among the states, and that the young people who use it like it. We want young people to grow up thinking, look, I can be part of making things happen in my city, my state, in the community where I live and work, and that's exactly what I want. So I think we're on the right track.
A lot of people in this audience have met my colleague, Sandra Day O'Connor. She's awesome.
So the energy was palpable when you walked into the building today, and I can feel it in this room already. I just want to say, I don't know if you remember when we first met, but it was several years ago when we were hosting the women judges at the Supreme Court, and this is a great story about Justice O'Connor. Every year, she would host the women judges at the Supreme Court. One year she called me, and she said, Kim, I have good news and bad news for you. What do you want first? I said, definitely the bad news. She said, okay, look, I'm not going to be able to make it this year. I have something that I can't change. But the other girls are going to host for me. And by the other girls, she meant Justice Sotomayor, Justice Ginsburg, and Justice Kagan. So that was my first introduction to you, and what a wonderful one it was.
And I got a call, and I was told, Sonia, you have to do this. And nobody says no to her.
Absolutely. So I want to just begin by asking you a little bit about how you got involved with iCivics, why you got involved with iCivics, and what Justice O'Connor has meant to you.
Well, I'll start with the first, okay? She told you it took 191 years for the first female justice. Until I left the DA's office and got to private practice, I did not have a professional woman mentor. In most of the places I was at, women were in the minority. Princeton, we were the third year of women at Princeton University. It was about 15% women. So that for me, and the day I graduated from law school, there were no women on the Supreme Court, no women on any of the highest courts of any of the 50 states. And so, you know, when kids ask me, did you ever dream of becoming a Supreme Court justice? I often say to them, you can't dream about what you don't know.
Exactly.
all right? And that includes that I lived in a community that didn't have lawyers, but I lived in a world where there wasn't an expectation I would ever be a justice. And her achieving her position opened the door, not for me to hope to be a justice, because I understood that was pretty hard, but for me to dream that I could have a meaningful career in life, that I could make a difference. And that hope is what motivates anyone to face the challenges that life presents.
Gina Davis, the Gina Davis Institute, and I think they might be here tonight, they have a great saying, if she can see it, she can be it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so Sandra gave me the hope that I could find the place in my profession. And I did. But through her, I also learned that you have an obligation as a justice, not merely to do your work in the courtroom, but to look for ways to make change happen in the world. And when I heard about iCivics, and everyone in the legal profession heard about it because she told everybody, when I heard about it, I realized what a wonderful project this is. Imagine combining legal principles, political principles, principles about government, and using them to inspire kids to try to become change agents. And so that's what iCivics does. Well, the long and the short of how I got involved is last year, I was called and asked to join the board of iCivics. And,
Very good.
I had to say yes. But I said yes very willingly, in large measure because it may be the longest lasting legacy that Sandra Day O'Connor leaves, because it will change America.
It was amazing. When she started it back in 2008, she was chairing the Games for Change conference, and we were accompanying her to the Games for Change conference that year, and she said, Kim, they need video games. That's what they do all day long. If you want to reach the kids, we're going to design a video game. Great.
What incredible vision she had. And she was doing this project in her 70s. There's still people in their 40s and 50s on my court that don't use the computer.
So one last anecdote about Justice O'Connor. As you mentioned, she really is a model for service. And I remember last year when we did the tribute to Justice O'Connor, Justice Ginsburg made this statement that when she had first joined the bench, people started asking her to appear at the events that Justice O'Connor had appeared at. And after a while, she started to think that maybe Justice O'Connor had a twin, because it would have been impossible to both be in the court and doing all the civic engagement that Justice O'Connor was doing. She's very special.
She is exceedingly special, and her belief in the power of change through civic education is something I share deeply. Most of my work in outreach is to encourage and try to motivate kids to believe that they can make a difference, that they don't have to be bystanders in life. None of us should ever say the law happens to us or that politics happen to us. All of law, all of politics is done by people to other people. So if you don't like something, get up and change it. And that's my message to kids all the time. You know, we can't be political, so we have to find the way around that. And this is a pretty nice way around it.
So in your wonderful book, you talk about your life's journey. And
All right, half the people in this audience know I hate sitting down. And you guys have been sitting down a long time. But I don't have to. So I'm gonna get up and walk around, okay? So the people in the back can see me. Sorry about you guys up there, that's too far for me to go.
you can come down here if you want and stand in the back.
Yeah, you can do that.
So Justice, I always wanted to follow in your footsteps. Up for today, I'm going to sit on the stage.
You can do that.
Okay.
So go ahead
I'll
and
keep
ask your
asking my
question.
questions from here. How about that? So in your book, My Beloved World, You talk about your life, which really, when you think about it, is really the embodiment of the American dream. We're going to do this talk show style. So how has your
Very
personal...
good at listening. I'm really good at listening.
How has your personal story influenced your work with iCivics and with children around the country?
Well, in more direct answer to your first question,
Okay.
at that tribute to Sandra Day O'Connor, I was sitting in the audience listening more closely to the background involving iCivics. And as I was sitting there, I was thinking to myself, you know, do ELS students, English as a second language students, are they using the game? And that afternoon I went home to the court.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a Freudian slip. And I called my cousin, who's a bilingual education teacher in Connecticut. She's Miriam in the book, to those who have read my book. And I asked her, do you use the game? And she said to me, there are friends in the audience, you know. And I asked her, and she said, I love the games. And I said, do your kids like them? And she said, I can hardly use them. They don't have enough English skills for it to be a useful teaching tool for me. And my next question was, well, can the games be changed or modified to help you use them? And she said, sure. I'd have to think about it, but I think they could be. And after a couple of days, she called me back and she says, I have some ideas. So I put her in touch with Louise, the head of iCivics, and that's how the invitation for me to join the board happened, okay? And now that's become, iCivics is involved in many new projects to enhance and expand the games. One that's very important to me that the board just is emphasizing is how to translate the games into actual practice. How can we modify what we're doing so teachers can figure out a way to take what the kids are learning through the games and actually make changes? So that's a really important project. The second is we're trying to reach high school students. And so we're looking to create games for them. It'd be useful for you. But I'm going to challenge you. Go play the games now, and I bet you're not going to be able to answer half the questions.
Now, that's my nephew. I'm going to make him do it.
All right. All right. I got one wrong, so the rest of you should do some, okay? All right. And so high school students.
Yes.
And the third has been inspired by me, which is we're looking to modify the games to make them more accessible to ELS students and to poor readers, because they are about 20% of our population, our school-age population. And in that way, I'm hoping to expand the outreach of iCivics to those inner city schools that generally house the kids who have the greatest needs. And so that is how I got involved in iCivics, but that's my continuing vision, its growth and its translation into making a change where it's needed the most. And so that's what I'm doing now.
So I remember a few years back, we did a project with iCivics and the Virtue Foundation, actually, where we went to the schools to see the kids, to do sort of a digital storytelling program and to emphasize the games. And I hear, and it was very inspiring for me, I hear that you spend quite a bit of time in the schools, talking to kids, being with kids. What do you learn from them, and what do they learn from you?
Oh, God, I love kids. They're the best thing we have, you know? They're our future, and they want to hope. You know, I talk to kids, and you listen to their dreams, and you realize, as I tell them, you can't become what you don't know. The purpose of education is to expand your knowledge. And once you do that, you can figure out that there's a lot more to become than your little world where you live. And so part of my mission is to reach out to as many kids as I humanly can, and there is a limit, by the way. I still have a day job, and I don't have a twin, and I don't have half of Sandra Day O'Connor's energy. But my hope is, when I meet kids, is to get them thinking about their dreams and figuring out how to take positive steps to achieve them. And that's what I talk to kids about. A little bit about how I did it, but also about some of the things they can do to make their dreams come true. And so, what have I learned from them? That adults teach despair. And we should all spend a lot more time appreciating the hope that our kids have and taking energy from it. I think if we all did that, we'd be a better world, because we wouldn't be as tired as most of us are most of the time.
So true. So, oh, look at this.
You have come on. This is one of my favorite grandkids. This is my grand clerk. Thank you.
So I want to ask you a question, bringing it back to your personal journey. When did you realize that you had this passion and interest in justice and the law?
You know, for me, it happened pretty early. And it doesn't happen for everybody early. I tell kids all the time, don't close off your possibilities. Be open to different ideas. But for me, I very early on understood that law was something very special. It's, if you're practicing the way you should, what you're doing is helping people in their relationships. You are making people's relationships better. Now, the solution may not always be to their liking. If they go to court, somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. But you as a lawyer are attempting, and should be attempting, to make that process understandable to your clients and to give them the best opportunity they can to get their needs and their desires expressed in court. But most lawyers never end up in court. There's a lot of lawyers who are doing transactional work of one type or another, often for businesses, but who helps you buy and sell your house? A real estate agent and a lawyer, okay? Who writes your will? A lawyer. Who resolves questions that you might have about your legal rights in the workplace? A lawyer. All of these things are service to people's relationship. But most importantly, I think people forget how important law is in shaping us as a community. My prime example always is red and green lights. When I ask kids, why do you stop at a red light? Most of them say, because my mother told me. But then I ask, who told your mother? All right? And then they stop, and one of them will always pipe up, because the law says you have to. And when you think about, why do we have this law? What is the law trying to do? It is trying to make people's competing interest of getting to where they're going as fast as they can, and not do it in a way that will result in injury to a lot of people. We could have no red or green lights. We can let people run as fast as they can, and some people will push others out of the way, and some people won't look and they'll hurt someone and probably stop their own progress. But people sometimes don't think, okay? And so what's the law saying to all of you, all of us? Give up a little bit of your time so the society can be safer, so more people can reach their goal without injury. And we do that willingly, right? Because we understand the need for that law. And there's a whole bunch of other laws that do that are regulating our existence as a community and trying to ensure that what we do with one another is doing the least damage to the whole. Now, that doesn't mean that every law is understandable. And it doesn't mean that every law is good. Because when you have competing interests, somebody gives something up. And when you give something up, some people are going to be unhappy. We have a quotient of unhappiness, and that quotient is, how unhappy are you going to stay? When are you going to feel that it's bad enough that you'll get up and do something about it? And that's what change requires. That getting up as a community and saying, no, this is not the way we want our law to operate. This is not how we want our government to function. This is not how we want to regulate our relationship with one another. But it really takes first, you have to have some knowledge of that entity that creates law, government, courts. And secondly, you have to have the desire to do it, right? So that's why, for me, this iCivics project is so important. And I had a sense of this at a very early age. I knew at one point that the law, this idea of service to others, this idea of relationships with one another, I wanted to be a part of that conversation. And, you know, it's pretty nice being a justice. I get to be a part in something pretty important.
Well, we're...
But all of us are a part of it. And all of us can do something about those relationships and those ways of interacting with each other that we don't like. And so I hope each of you find your passion, because it doesn't have to be the same for everybody. And changes don't always have to be on the federal scale or in state politics. Sometimes they can be on much smaller scales. What are you doing in your neighborhoods? What are you doing in your churches and synagogues, your mosque? How are you interacting? You know, I often ask kids, how many of you have ever stepped foot in the precinct in your neighborhood? How many of you, other than saying good morning, officer, have ever visited the precinct and gotten to know the people who are there? How many of you here have done that? There's only about a quarter of the hands raised. And so how do we expect police officers in their community to interact if we don't take the time to build relationships? And so, my challenge to all of you, find your passion. I don't care what it is, but do something. It makes you feel great. And it's so needed.
Well, we're so lucky to have you championing iCivics.
You're going to invite me back up, or are we finished?
It's an open invitation. To have an organization that was started by one woman Supreme Court Justice and now championed by another Supreme Court Justice with equal conviction is really remarkable. And we're so lucky to have you on the court, Justice Sotomayor, as a woman lawyer. As a woman lawyer, I can speak to many of the women lawyers in the room, what this meant for all of us when you were appointed. So, Justice O'Connor, I feel I must stand if the justice is approaching. Justice O'Connor.
You got a little law in you, you know.
I got a little law. Thank you very much,
Thank
Justice
you.
Sotomayor, and we'll hear more from
Thank
iCivics.
you all. Okay.